Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to be going over what exactly is a promise in JavaScript and why we want to use them. But before we can talk about promises, I briefly want to go over callbacks. Traditionally, callbacks are how we have accomplished asynchronous programming in JavaScript. And what exactly do I mean by asynchronous programming? Well, in JavaScript, usually our lines of code execute in order that they're written, so that's synchronous, right? But certain tasks are asynchronous, things like retrieving data from the internet, or in the case of Node.js, reading or writing a file on the hard drive. And there are also other built-in functions in JavaScript that are asynchronous by nature, like setInterval or setTimeout. These are things that are part of the core of the language that are just asynchronous by nature. There's nothing you can do to spontaneously create asynchronous code. The only way you can have asynchronous code is if your code is interacting with one of these pieces that is already asynchronous. So I have an example here, and the goal here is to use a function I've written called slowEcho. So I'm about to walk you through that. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I have a function called slowEcho, and right now it's written to use the old way, the traditional way of doing asynchronous programming in JavaScript, and that is by using a callback. So I've written a function called slowEcho that takes 3 arguments. They are the delay, or how long to wait before echoing back the message. They are the message to echo back, and then we have the callback. So this parameter, you can call it whatever you want, but it's going to be the callback function. So I'm just calling it callback here. Now in here, I'm going to use the built-in JavaScript function setTimeout. This is one of those functions that is asynchronous by nature. Okay, so we've got the setTimeout function here, and it takes 2 arguments. The first is technically it's a callback. So this is, what function do you want to be executed after waiting a certain amount of time? So I've got this right here, and I'm saying wait for the delay. So if I pass in 1000, then we're going to wait 1000 milliseconds. If I pass in 3000, we're going to wait 3000, and so on. So what do I do in here? Well, callback is a parameter that's standing in for a function. Okay, you might not be used to that, but you can pass a function as an argument to another function in JavaScript. So delay is going to be a number, message is going to be a string, callback is going to be the name of a function you can call. So here's callback, and we are passing in message. So what does this look like when we use it? Well, I'm using jQuery in this example to select the button on my page, and I'm adding a click listener. And what I want to do is I want to call slowEcho and pass in a delay. So let's say 2000 milliseconds. And for the message, I'm going to type hello world. And then I have my callback here. And this function I'm writing right now in line, it's going to be dropped into this parameter. And I can see right here that when it's called, we pass something into it. So I need to have a parameter here. Now if this is your first time looking at this, it's pretty confusing because, it's like, where did this come from? Why did you decide to call it MSG or whatever? So this parameter, you can call it whatever you want. It just needs to hold a value. So it's very weird to think about, but this function I've selected right here is going to be called callback. That's what it's going to be named within this function. So this function right here is being dropped into callback. Just like hello world is going to be dropped into the parameter message, this function is going to be dropped into the parameter callback. So right here on line 3, when we call callback and pass in message, it's really going to execute this code right here and drop in the whatever message is at this point in time into this function. So we have that now, and what I want to do is console log MSG, or whatever this parameter is called. And out here, I'm also just going to console log, just YOLO, something silly. Okay, so let's see this in action. So I'm going to come over here and I'm logging to the console. So I do want to open the developer console. You can quickly do that by right clicking and going to inspect and then clicking on console up here. So I'm going to click this button and we see YOLO immediately. And then after a few seconds, we see hello world. Okay. So YOLO happened immediately. Why is that? Because here's console log. Well, this is asynchronous programming, right? Things can happen out of order than we would usually expect. So even though this line of code was first, it hadn't finished waiting 2000 milliseconds, so JavaScript proceeded on. This code was deferred until this finished, or until the 2000 milliseconds finished. But while we were waiting, other lines of code are free to execute. So that's why we saw YOLO first, okay? Now this gets really confusing because what if I want to print multiple lines in succession, each waiting a certain amount of time? So let me show you what I mean. So let's say I wanted to slow echo again. So this time I say slow echo 1000, and this time the message is hello. And then I need another one. I could call this MSG or I could call it MSG2. I'm going to console log MSG2, and then I'm going to call slow echo again. This time I'll wait 3000 milliseconds and say goodbye, MSG3, and I'll console log MSG3. Okay. So the callback is basically you're saying, hey, when you're finished doing whatever you need to do asynchronously, in this case it's waiting, but maybe it was talking over the internet to a server. When you're finished with that, run this function and pass in your answer, your data, whatever it is. So that's what the callback is. It's your chance to schedule code in the future, right? You're saying, I know you take some time to complete, that's fine, but when you're finished, give me a callback. Right? Call this function right here and pass in that data. So let's just first verify this works, and then we'll talk about the downside to this approach. So I've saved everything. I'm going to go refresh my page and click the button. There's my YOLO message. Here's hello world, and then hello, and then 3 seconds later, goodbye. Okay? So that's doing the behavior we wanted. But look at this code, it's very messy. You could imagine if you had like 6 or 7 things that you needed to do in order, this would get crazy. And this is actually, there's a term for this when you have this pyramid of code. It's called callback hell. And it actually could get even worse if you had error callbacks. Right now I've only demonstrated a success callback, but usually you'll have another one that gets called if there's an error. So then you end up, you have this, comma, and then another one. And you'd also have to do it for this one and this one. So you can see that it's going to quickly balloon and get out of hand. So that is, using a callback. That was the original way we did this. Luckily, ES6 has brought about promises, and promises are a much more concise and cleaner way of dealing with asynchronous code in JavaScript. So let me go ahead and transform this example for you to use a promise. And we can also talk about what exactly is a promise. So for slow echo, I'm just going to take delay and message as my parameters. And I'm going to clear this out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell this function to return a new promise. So I'm going to call the promise constructor. And the promise constructor takes a single argument. And that argument is called the executor. Essentially, it is a function that wraps, it encapsulates more complicated callback style asynchronous code, right? So you're not going to create, it's very rare you're going to create a promise to wrap around a promise in this manner. You would use another type of shorthand to do that. But if you're going to be building out a full-blown promise like this with the promise constructor, usually what's in here is old style callback based asynchronous code. So I like to tell people, think of it like the promise is this simple abstraction, the simple machine that you're building around a more complicated machine. So we just saw the more complicated machine, like the set timeout and the callbacks and all that stuff. So you're building this simple device around that to hide some of the complexity. So we've got this promise here. And what is this right here? Resolve, reject. You can technically name these whatever you want, but just call them resolve and reject. It's going to make it a lot easier on you because that's what 99% of the examples on the internet say. And also that's what these things do. So if this is a simple machine we're building around this complex machine, resolve and reject are two buttons that we can press. When you press resolve, you mark the promise as resolved. Everything went A-OK. And when you press reject, you're marking the promise as rejected. We encountered some type of error condition. The promise did not finish doing what it set out to do. So, big thing about promises. When they're first created, they are in pending status, right? We say that they're pending. They have not fulfilled. They have not finished doing their job. The promise then moves to one of two states. It will either be marked as resolved, which again means everything's A-OK, or it will be marked as rejected, which means that something has failed. So how do we do that? Well, resolve and reject here, these parameters, they're actually functions that we call. So if I wanted to, I could just call resolve here, and it would mark this promise as resolved. Now, there are shorthand methods that you don't normally build out a full-blown promise like this if you're going to immediately resolve it. We'll talk about that later. But what you usually do in here is you put some type of asynchronous code. So I'm going to use, because this one's really easy for us to use without having to write any type of network code, I'm going to use set timeout. Okay, so we already talked about set timeout, and I'm going to tell it to wait delay. So I'm using this parameter up here. I could have hard-coded a value, but I'm just going to use what's passed in. And then what do we want to do after waiting this amount of time? Well, we are going to mark the promise as resolved. So let me do that real quick. I'm going to mark the promise as resolved by calling the resolve function. And you could just do that, but usually 99% of the time your promise has gone out and done some work and achieved some type of value. In this case, it's going to be echoing back a message, but it could have gone out on the internet and downloaded the word of the day or the current weather, something like that. So once we have retrieved that data, we typically would mark the promise as resolved and pass that data into the resolve function. So in this case, I'm going to resolve with message. Right? I could have resolved with 2. Maybe the answer was 2, right? This promise did its job. It came up with 2, and it's saying, all right, we're finished. The result is 2. Or maybe it's hello. Okay? But in this case, I'm going to be echoing back whatever the message is that's passed in is. So I'm just going to put my message parameter. All right. So now this code right here is going to change. Now I'm going to call slow echo, and I'm going to pass in a delay. So I'll say 2000, and I'll pass in hello world. Now I don't need the callback parameter anymore. That's it. And what this does, so I'm calling slow echo, right? What does it do? Well, it returns a new promise. So if this is returning a value, I want to capture that value in a variable. So I can say let p equal this. P, short for promise, or whatever you want to call it. So how then do I attach code? How do I attach code to run after we have a guarantee that this promise has finished, this promise has resolved? The way you do that is by using the .then function. .then is a function built into every promise. So if P is a promise because it was returned by calling slow echo, then we can say p.then. And what do we put inside this function? Well, technically what we're about to put in here is a callback, but usually we're going to call this a success handler, okay? And it's going to have a parameter. For now, we'll call it val until we figure out exactly what it is. And I'm going to console log val, okay? All right, so p.then, here's the open parenthesis for calling the then function. Here's the closed parenthesis. We pass a single parameter into it, a single argument, and that argument is a callback. It's a we're going to call it a success handler. So this is a function that's going to be called whenever the promise resolves. It will only be called when the promise resolves. So I'm going to save this code and go over here and refresh the page. All right, I get my YOLO message. After 2 seconds, I see hello world. Where is that coming from? Well, Chrome Developer Tools are telling me it's coming from line 12 of my file, which is right here. So that's console log val. How did val get to become hello world, right? Hello world, the last place I saw it was right here. So let's trace that along. So we called slow echo. 2000 got dropped into the delay parameter. Hello world got dropped into the message parameter. Slow echo returned a promise, so that got stored in variable p. And this promise, remember, it's this simple machine around something more complicated. And it's simple because it only has two possibilities. Eventually it'll resolve, eventually it will reject, one of those two. And so after waiting a certain amount of time, the promise resolved with message, right? Right now that's hello world. So when it resolves, then this the success handler will be called. And whatever you resolve with, that's what gets dropped into this parameter here, val. And so that's why we saw hello world logged to the console. Now that we know what that is, we might want to come up with a better name for this. So maybe we'll call this echoed message. Okay, echoed message. All right. And what if I wanted to do what I did before and call multiple promises back to back and wait on each one to finish? So when you're first starting out, you might try something like this. A lot of people do this. You might say, okay, well, let's do slow echo again. This time I'll wait 1000 and I'll pass hello. I'll wait on that with .then, msg. Okay, and then you call slow echo again, 3000, goodbye, .then. Okay, so let's verify this is going to work first, and then we'll talk about why this approach isn't the best. All right, so there's my YOLO. All right, 1 second later, 3 seconds later, we should see goodbye. All right, so that seems to be working. What does this look like? Right, this looks like callback hell. So when you're using promises and your code looks like this, it's a big hint to you, flashing red light saying you're not quite doing something right. You're not fully taking advantage of promises. So what I want to do here, I want to establish a promise chain. Okay, so how do we establish a promise chain? Okay, so the way you do that, we want to call slow echo again, right? And before I said slow echo and I just called it. So 1000 and it's going to be hello as the message. Now before I did .then off of this because slow echo returns a new promise and functions return in place. So I can just do .then, okay? But what I want to do, I want to return this, okay? Return. We're inside of a function right now, okay? This function is inside of .then. When you return a value, a promise or a value, when you return something from inside a success handler, then that value is going to be lifted up and it's going to be returned by then as well. That's a little confusing. You don't really need to know the specifics. You just need to know that anytime you're relying on another promise, when you want to call another one and wait for it to finish, you want to put the word return here and then do another .then. I'm going to do em for echoed message, so em2, console log em2, return slow echo, not show echo, slow echo 3000, goodbye. All right, dot then MSG or em3 console log em3. Okay, so this looks much neater, much cleaner. So when you have multiple promises that you want to call back to back, you want to create a chain like this. The adage here is that you should keep your code flat when you are working with multiple promises. And it's really easy to do. You just put return, and then it's going to be pulled out of here, and you can chain. You can just keep chaining these dot thens. And as long as you put return, this code is not going to happen until this promise resolves. If I forget return, then it's not going to work right, okay? This is going to be kicked off. This is going to run before this can finish. So you always want to make sure you put return here. So let's see. I'm going to refresh the page, click the button. There's my YOLO. Hello world. Hello. 3 seconds later, we should have goodbye. All right. And just to show you really quickly what happens if you leave off return, I'm going to refresh the page. Hello world, undefined, and then 3 seconds later, goodbye. So why did undefined log? And specifically, what's missing, right? We don't see hello with a question mark. So why is that? Well, hello with a question mark comes after waiting 1 second. That's the result of this promise resolving. But by not putting return here, this chain just implicitly returned. It implicitly resolved and moved on. So because the promise did not explicitly resolve with a value, then em2 is just going to be undefined. There's nothing it resolved with, it just resolved. And so em2 is undefined, and that's why we log undefined. So we want to make sure we explicitly say, no, instead of you marking this as resolved with no value, I'm telling you, I want you to return this thing instead. I want you to return a promise that's eventually going to resolve with the word hello. And that way, when this dot then is triggered, em2 will correctly be the string hello. Okay? And we already saw a demo of that working. So this is why we use promises, right? This looks pretty clean. And once you have a promise, it's very easy to chain promises together, establishing these chains using return. The final thing I want to touch on here is how do we, what about rejection, right? I've talked about the promise resolving, but what about the promise rejecting? So to do that, I want to introduce a little random element here. So I'm going to say like let random val equal math.floor, math.random times 10. All right, and I'll say if random val mod 2 is equal to 0, then we're going to resolve with the message. Otherwise, we're going to reject with a new error, and the error is just going to say something odd happened. Okay. All right. So what did I do here? I generated a random number, random integer, 0 through 9. And I said, if it's even, then we're going to do this. If it's odd, we're going to do this. Essentially, it was just a coin flip, basically. I needed to introduce some amount of random logic. So I want to not call resolve here. I'm either going to resolve the promise or reject the promise. Okay, so this is an example of making a decision. In this case, it's random, but in a real example, it's if you encountered an error when talking to a server on the internet, if the file you're trying to read from the hard drive was not found. These are conditions where you will reject the promise. Otherwise, if everything's okay, you're going to resolve the promise. So what does this look like? All right, so I'm not going to change this code just yet. I'm going to save everything, go back and refresh the page. All right, hello world, uncall, in promise, error, something happened. So we get this red message here saying there's an uncalled error, something odd happened. And importantly, the chain did not continue. That's interesting, right? I just see hello world. I didn't get to this one or this one. So, you know, this is a problem. What can I do? Well, when you're using .then, remember I said that you can pass a callback function here, a success handler. Well, you can also pass a second argument in, and that would be the error handler. Okay, so you could do this. All right, so here's .then. Here's the parenthesis from when the then function was called, and it does not close until right here on my line 22. So we're actually passing two things into .then right now. We're passing in a success function, and we're passing in an error function. If this promise resolves, then the success function is called. If the promise rejects, the success function is skipped over and the error function is called. You can do this for any .then. You can have a success and you can have an error. So we could go and do this for each of these .thens. That could get a little messy, but it is something you would do if you had special error handling logic for each of these promises. So maybe they're not the same promise over and over again. Maybe it's go out and get the word of the day, and then go out and get the weather, and then go out and send an email. So these are things that maybe each one of them, when they encounter an error, you want to handle it differently. And if that's the case, sure, do this, right? Have a custom error handler on each .then. But this specific example here, look at this. It's the same promise over and over. Or maybe it could be different promises, but I always want to handle the error the same way. So if that's the case, then I can do a .catch down here at the end of the chain. And I'll have my parameter here, and I'll just say console log call error. And then I'll go ahead and console log the error. Okay, so let's see this in action. I'm going to come over here and refresh the page. Okay, and actually I was pretty unlucky. The very first one rejected, and it said call error, something odd happened. I never got one of my echoed messages. So that's another interesting thing about promises. Whenever one of them rejects, so let's say in this case this one rejected, it's going to look in the first .then and say, all right, there's the success handler, where's the error handler? Oh, there's not one? Well, let's move on to the next .then. There's the success handler, where's the error handler? There's not one. Well, let's move on to the next .then, and so on, until it finds one, or until it finds a .catch. And that's what happened here. And also, once we go into the .catch, it doesn't go back up and continue, right? It cancels this entire chain. So if the error happened here, then we would, well, if the error happened, yeah, here, we would log the first message. We would log hello world because that happened right here. But if this promise rejects, then the next place we go is down here to the .catch. And this is actually a good thing. This is important because usually when you're chaining promises together, it's because a later one relies on the value of the first one. Okay, this example here is a little contrived, but usually when you have a chain, the lower ones need the values from the higher ones. So if there's a problem in a higher promise up here in the chain, then we want to skip over these other ones and go straight to the .catch. So this is working exactly as we'd like it to. So this has been a brief high-level overview of basically how you can create a promise, how you can use promises with .then and .catch. I hope you enjoyed it. I did just remember, I promised you we were going to talk about, get it? I promised you. All right, so I promised you we were going to talk about how to write a promise that immediately resolves or immediately rejects. The way you can do that is you could say something like let p equal promise.resolve hello. Let q equal promise.reject, and this is going to be a new error. Okay, so these are really simple promises. This is a shortcut. If you need to quickly make a promise that's going to resolve with a value every time or reject with an error every time, this is how you can do it. Usually these are used in certain cases, like if you need to quickly start off a promise chain. This might be a simple way to do that if you already have a value. Or if you need a function to always return a promise, and sometimes you have the value and sometimes you need to go out on the internet and grab the value, then if you don't have the value, you return the promise that goes out on the internet and grabs the value.
And if you already have the value locally, you wrap it in a promise and return it. That way, whatever calls that function can always use .then. So that's one reason you might want to use these. So I hope you liked this primer into what exactly are promises in JavaScript, why do we use them, how do we use them. So if you like what you saw, check out our other videos on our channel, and please subscribe to our channel so you can find other great videos like this as we make them.